A defining moment, the shadow of Chernobyl. On April 26, 1986, the world watched in horror. A nuclear reactor had exploded in Chernobyl, Ukraine. This event would forever alter our perception of nuclear energy. It raised a question that still resonates today. What caused the most catastrophic nuclear disaster in history, and what were its lasting impacts? Chernobyl was more than just an accident. It was a stark reminder of the immense power we wield with nuclear technology. The disaster exposed critical flaws in reactor design and safety protocols. It also highlighted the devastating consequences of human error. The explosion released a plume of radioactive material into the atmosphere. This plume spread across Europe and beyond. The world watched as the invisible threat of radiation cast a long shadow over the future. Chernobyl forced us to confront the potential consequences of our technological choices. It served as a wake-up call, demanding greater responsibility in the development and use of nuclear power. The heart of the matter, RBMK reactors. To understand the Chernobyl disaster, we must first understand the reactor at its heart. The Chernobyl power plant utilized RBMK 1000 reactors. This Soviet-designed reactor was different from those commonly used in the West. RBMK reactors were graphite-moderated. This meant they used graphite to control the nuclear chain reaction. Graphite, while effective, is also flammable. This design choice would prove to be a fatal flaw. These reactors were also known for their complex design. They lacked a robust containment structure, a feature common in Western reactors. A containment structure is designed to prevent the release of radioactive material in case of an accident. Furthermore, RBMK reactors had a positive void coefficient. This meant that as the reactor heated up, the rate of the nuclear reaction could increase uncontrollably. This design characteristic made the reactor inherently unstable. Seeds of disaster design flaws and human error. The Chernobyl disaster was not solely the result of inherent flaws in the RBMK reactor design. A series of human errors and a disregard for safety protocols compounded the situation. In the months leading up to the accident, there were warning signs. Operators had observed instability in the reactor's operation. However, these concerns were not adequately addressed. On the night of April 25, 1986, a safety test was scheduled. This test was intended to simulate a power outage. The goal was to determine how long the reactor could continue to cool itself. The test was poorly planned and executed. Operators, under pressure to complete the test, bypassed several safety systems. This created a dangerous situation within the reactor core. The test that ignited a nightmare. April 26, 1986. The safety test commenced as planned, but it quickly went awry. Operators, unaware of the reactor's unstable state, continued with the procedure. They reduced power output to the reactor as per the test protocol. However, due to the reactor's design flaws, this reduction in power had an unexpected effect. The rate of the nuclear reaction began to increase rapidly. The reactor was on the verge of a meltdown. Operators attempted to shut down the reactor, but it was too late. The control rods, designed to absorb neutrons and slow down the reaction, were inserted too slowly. The combination of design flaws, human error, and a disregard for safety protocols had set the stage for disaster. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant exploded. Section 5. The roar of silence, the explosion and immediate chaos. The explosion at Chernobyl was not a single event, but a series of catastrophic failures. The initial explosion blew the massive 1,000-ton lid off the reactor. This exposed the reactor core to the open air. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through the surrounding area. It was felt as far away as 10 kilometers. Debris from the reactor, some of it highly radioactive, was scattered across the power plant site. The explosion ignited a fire in the graphite moderator. This fire would burn for days, releasing enormous amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. In the immediate aftermath, there was confusion and disbelief. Plant operators struggled to comprehend the scale of the disaster. They initially believed that the explosion had not breached the reactor core. Section 6. A ghost town emerges, evacuation, and initial response. The first to respond to the disaster were the firefighters from the nearby town of Pripyat. They arrived at the plant unaware of the invisible danger they faced. They had not been trained or equipped to deal with a nuclear accident. Despite their bravery, the firefighters' efforts to extinguish the fire were hampered by the intense heat and radiation. Many of these first responders would later succumb to radiation sickness. As the severity of the situation became apparent, the decision was made to evacuate the nearby town of Pripyat. The evacuation began 36 hours after the explosion. Residents were told to pack only essential items, believing they would return in a few days. Over 50,000 people were evacuated from Pripyat. The town, once a bustling community, became a ghost town, frozen in time. The evacuation would prove to be permanent. Section 7. The Unseen Enemy. Radiation's Silent Grip. One of the most insidious aspects of the Chernobyl disaster was the invisible threat of radiation. The explosion released a plume of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. These isotopes, including iodine 131, cesium 137, and strontium 90, posed significant health risks. Iodine 131, with a short half-life of 8 days, was a major concern in the immediate aftermath. It can accumulate in the thyroid gland, increasing the risk of thyroid cancer, especially in children. Cesium 137 and strontium 90, with much longer half-lives, contaminated the soil and water. These isotopes can accumulate in the food chain, posing long-term health risks to humans and animals. The Soviet government initially downplayed the severity of the disaster. Information about the radiation release was suppressed. This lack of transparency delayed the implementation of protective measures for the population. Section 8. Scars on the land. Environmental devastation. The Chernobyl disaster had a profound impact on the environment. The explosion and subsequent fire released a cocktail of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. These isotopes settled on the ground, contaminating soil, water, and vegetation. The area around the Chernobyl power plant, known as the exclusion zone, became a stark reminder of the disaster's environmental toll. This zone, spanning over 1,000 square miles, remains largely uninhabited due to high levels of radiation. The explosion and fire also destroyed vast tracts of forest surrounding the power plant. This area, known as the Red Forest, earned its name from the ginger-brown color of the dead trees. The Chernobyl disaster highlighted the interconnectedness of human health and the environment. The contamination spread through the food chain, affecting wildlife populations and raising concerns about the long-term ecological consequences. Section 9. A legacy of loss, long-term health impacts. The long-term health impacts of the Chernobyl disaster continue to be studied and debated. The immediate effects of radiation exposure were evident in the first responders and those living closest to the plant. These individuals experienced acute radiation sickness, with symptoms ranging from nausea and vomiting to severe burns and bone marrow suppression. Many of these first responders made heroic sacrifices to contain the disaster. The long-term effects of radiation exposure are more difficult to quantify. Studies have shown an increased incidence of thyroid cancer in those exposed to radiation as children. There is ongoing research into the potential links between radiation exposure and other cancers, cardiovascular disease, and genetic mutations. However, establishing a definitive causal link between these health problems and Chernobyl remains challenging. Section 10. Containing the beast, cleanup, and containment efforts. In the aftermath of the explosion, a massive effort was launched to contain the radioactive contamination. The most immediate task was to extinguish the fire burning in the reactor core. Helicopters dropped sand, lead, and other materials onto the reactor in an attempt to smother the fire. This effort, while dangerous, helped to reduce the release of radioactive material into the atmosphere. To contain the damaged reactor and prevent further release of radiation, a massive concrete structure known as the sarcophagus was hastily constructed. This structure, while flawed, served as a temporary barrier. In recent years, a new and more robust containment structure, known as the new safe confinement, has been built over the existing sarcophagus. This new structure is designed to contain the radioactive remains for the next 100 years. Section 11. Echoes of Chernobyl. Lessons for a safer future. The Chernobyl disaster stands as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of nuclear accidents. The disaster forced the world to confront the potential risks associated with nuclear power. In the wake of Chernobyl, there was a global push to improve nuclear safety standards. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, strengthened its regulations and oversight of nuclear power plants worldwide. The disaster also led to a reassessment of reactor designs. The RBMK 1000 reactor, with its inherent flaws, was phased out. Newer reactor designs incorporated enhanced safety features and passive safety systems. Chernobyl serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that technological progress must be accompanied by a commitment to safety, transparency, and a deep respect for the immense power we wield.